Hi everyone, my name is Kylie Saksic and I will be going over Chapter 10, Markets and Market Equilibrium. So what exactly is a market? A market is characterized as a particular location where a specific good or service is being sold at a defined time. So for example, it can be a market for eggs or even a market for peaches. But it is important to keep in mind that for a market to exist, it must have both buyers and sellers. So, a market is where buyers and sellers exchange or where there's both demand and supply. So, now that we have an understanding of what a market is in general, it is important to note that there are 6 necessary assumptions for markets, which is 1. A market is for a single good or service. 2. All goods or services bought and sold in a market are identical. 3. The good or service sells for a single price. 4. All consumers know everything about the product, including how much they value it. 5. There are many buyers and sellers, and they are known to each other and can interact. And 6. All the costs and benefits of a transaction accrue only to the buyers and sellers who engage in them. And this is important to be aware of so that there are no transactions that don't happen because the buyer doesn't know how much they like the product or because a buyer can't find a seller or vice versa. So, going back to our example, in the market for eggs, the majority of the eggs will have the same value and sell for one single price. And the consumers will know everything about the product. So now that we have an understanding of what a market is, we can move on to the topic of market equilibrium. Market equilibrium is a point where the quantities supplied by producers and the quantities demanded by consumers are equal. And in other words, we can say that this is where the supply and demand curves are together. When we look at a graph, we can say that this is where they meet. The graph consists of the supply and demand curve, and this is where we can determine the equilibrium price, which is the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. And the equilibrium price is denoted as P with a little asterisk. So, looking at the graph, we can clearly see that where the quantity demanded and quantity supply intersects, it creates the equilibrium, which is that, where you see the little point where the supply and demand curve intersects. So, for example, if we were to use the market of eggs, once quantities supplied and quantity demanded are met, it would give us our price equilibrium. We can also find this quantity mathematically. Consider a demand curve for a comforter that is described by the following function: Q to the power of D is equal 1800 minus 120p. Note that with the supply and demand curves, we draw graphs with quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical. However, because of this, it is sometimes easier to express the demand relationship as an inverse demand curve. The demand curve is expressed as a price as a function of quantity. So in our example, it would be P is equal to 90 minus 0.05 Q raised to the D. So this is just the original demand curve solved for P instead of Q to the power of D. And in the inverse demand curve, the vertical intercept is easy to see from the equation. Demand for the comforter stops at the price of $90. No consumer is willing to pay $90 or more for a comforter. The supply curve can also be represented as a mathematical function. Q raised to the S is equal to 50p minus 1000. And this can also be expressed in an inverse supply curve. The supply curve expressed as a price as a function of quantity. In this case, the inverse supply curve would be P is equal to 20 minus 0.03 Q raised to the S. Here, the vertical intercept, $20 gives us the minimum price to get a seller to sell the comforter. At prices of $20 or less, there will be no supply. So we know that the equilibrium price should be between $20 and $90. Now, when it comes to solving for the equilibrium price and quantity, all we need to do is set our demand and supply equal to each other, which will be expressed like so. Q raised to the D is equal to Q raised to the S, which D is demand and S is supply. And solving for the price, that makes this equality happen. So going back to our example with our comforter, we will set Q raised to the D equal to Q raised to the S. So we will take our two formulas and plug them in. 1800 minus 20p is equal to 50p minus 1000. So then we continue on and we do our math. And so that gives us 70p is equal to 2800, which then gives us the answer of P is equal to $40. And at P is equal to $40, the quantity demanded and supplied can be found from the demand and supply curves. Q raised to the D is equal to 1800 minus 20, and you plug in the 40, which is equal to 1000. Q raised to the S is equal to 50, and then you plug in your 40 minus 1000, which is equal to 1000. And notice how we got 1000 for both equations. This is because this was the condition we set at the outset, that quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So we know that a price of $40 per unit is the equilibrium price. And since we have also identified the equilibrium quantity, which is the Q asterisk, the quantity at which supply equals demand. At $40 per unit, 1,000 comforters are demanded, and exactly 1,000 comforters are supplied. The equilibrium quantity has nothing to do with any kind of coordination or communication between the buyers and sellers. It has only to do with the price in the market. Seeing a unit price of $40, consumers demand 1,000 units. Independently, sellers who see that price will choose to supply exactly 1,000 units of, in our case, comforters. And here is just an additional picture that I found online that provides another example. So in this case, apples. And just to give you guys more of a visual for those of you who learn better that way. And I didn't really go over this one, but I just thought that maybe for those of you who are curious, you guys can check this out. And it's just the shifts with the demand and supply curves and how like the old equilibrium price would change to the new equilibrium price. And that is it for my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed and understood something from it. Thank you for taking the time to listen.